prior to this volume, Rwby was always on this steady incline in terms of plot. Viewers ridiculed Volume 1 for being too generic when it came to introducing characters for the whole volume and not exactly having a particular plot for it. Volume 2, the complaints were similar, but instead of introducing characters, it was more so about their personalities this volume. And then Volume 3 happened. The plot progression was so intense. So much happened that it very easily claimed many fans, saying that it was their favorite volume thus far. After being introduced to so many characters, and killing off a few, Volume 4 had a lot of people's hopes and worries tied to it as well. But, is it good? Volume 4 picked up a few months after Volume 3 took place, so the characters' deaths affected their friends. Teams are broken up and scattered, everything seems to have gone to hell. In Volume 4 you have about 5 different stories that are happening. You have Weiss's story, Blake and Sun's story, Yang's story, Team Ranger's story, and to a lesser extent, Oscar's. 5 different stories, all completely unrelated to each other, so it's already juggling a lot of different things at once. Let's talk about how each one of them were handled. Let's start with Weiss. After the fall of Beacon, Papa Schnee has since taken his daughter back to his home, all in an effort to exploit her position for the company name. Weiss is tired of her father's authoritarian ways and is taking her life into her own hands. It's good to see that Weiss's character, who she is a fairly honest individual. She's always come across as a cold-hearted person, especially when compared to the other girls, but this volume proves that Weiss's statement back in Volume 1 holds weight behind it.
I'm a victim!
At the time, you couldn't really tell if that was her seeking sympathy or just an excuse, or people just thought that she was daddy's little girl complaining. Weiss's story in this volume shows that she really was a victim, presumably along with Winter, and we don't know about Whitley yet. Weiss's arc this volume really added to who she was as a character, because this is not a new event that she's going through with her life. This is something she's been dealing with forever, so while it definitely builds Weiss's character, it also doesn't, because she just runs away. It was a step in the right direction for Weiss because she told her father what she thought of him and what he was doing and how it was ruining the family name. However, even with that step, Weiss ultimately does what Blake does and runs away. So essentially, Weiss hasn't grown as a person, just we as a viewer have come to learn more about her. As for Yang's story, she doesn't really do anything. Following the events of her losing her arm, she appears to be over the initial depression she had at the end of Volume 3. However, she is still traumatized by the events that happened. She gets an arm, she trains, and then she leaves. There was no real story with Yang this volume. The biggest story comes from Tai Yang just talking about Raven. Yang, similar to us, is just a listener to this story. There's nothing wrong with the fact that Yang didn't do anything this volume. I get it, Yang was depressed in the Volume 3 finale and fans wanted a status report on her. Yang's story was more so a, hey, this is what Yang has been dealing with and what she's been up to. She's not fighting this greater evil, she's just doing her thing, which is fine. As for Blake, she is headed home to collect herself, which she appears to be doing when we first saw her. She took off her bow saying she doesn't need it anymore, which is true. She's capable of being who she is without any sort of discrimination. And who decides to tag along other than Sun? This entire volume, Sun is the comedic character now that John is depressed and is incapable of doing so. I always saw Sun as the cool character, with Neptune being the wannabe cool. But now, since this show needs a comedic character and Jean is incapable of doing so, Sun is there to fill those shoes. But Blake's story is really a Sun and Blake story. Blake no longer wants anything to do with the White Fang anymore, and Sun is trying to talk her out of it. While we did learn some new things about the White Fang, like Adam wanting to take control of the organization, some new members and how they attempt to manipulate people by saying they're passive, and how Adam doesn't represent them, the biggest part of Blake's story was Blake and Sun and their relationship with one another. Blake is essentially trying to push everyone away from her so they don't get hurt, but Sun is there to put her in check. Sun spends the entire volume telling her that her friends make their own choices and you can't just lock them out of her life. That was really the main importance of what Blake was going through. She also appears to be holding her ground, wanting to fight back. We'll see how long that lasts before she runs away again. As for Team Ranger, it was mainly a Ren story. While Rwby, Jean, and Nora were all there, it was basically all about Ren. Now some of you might be thinking, well, it was also about Nora. Yes and no. Technically speaking, we never learned anything about her. Sure, she met Ren while young and he gave her her hammer, but you didn't learn anything about her past. So while everyone from Team Ranger was there, all eyes were on Ren this volume. And it was good. Looking back, he's so far the only main character who we've gotten a flashback of with valuable information. Everyone else's past is still a big mystery. I mean, we did get that story of Rwby and Yang walking through the forest, getting attacked and such, but with Ren, we were actually given useful information. So the whole Ranger story was Ren avenging his father's death. While that may not have been Team Ranger's goal, it was the goal that was accomplished from a viewer's perspective. So Ren was capable of getting closure on an event that he didn't particularly seem to be affecting him in the past volumes. But whatever, he's over it now. As for the rest of Team Juniper, they were there. We got a whole new cast of villains: Salem, Watts, Tyrion, Cinder, Hazel, all new different people that we know nothing about. Except for Tyrion, he's one of those crazy people who seems to place Salem on this pedestal for a currently unknown reason. Speaking of new characters, we also got Oscar, the current iteration of Ozpin, or whatever Ozpin is. He has decided to listen to that voice in his head and abandon his life as a farm boy to fulfill a greater goal. Or so Ozpin tells him. Not much to say on a lot of these new characters other than they're new, and we have to wait to learn more about them. Now for the animation. For better or for worse, there was a switch from Poser to Maya. It had its advantages and its disadvantages. For one, the animation, aesthetically speaking, was absolutely beautiful. The colors, the shading, it's so much more vibrant and so much more full of life. The amount of characters that fit on a single screen absolutely blows away the silhouettes that you see in Volume 1. Now, part of that has to do with the amount of people who have begun working on it. It's grown so large as a production, obviously the quality was bound to increase with it as well. Me personally, while I do think that it looks absolutely amazing, there's still a part of me that kinda just misses Poser. Rwby had 3 volumes in Poser, and now with the switch to Maya, it just feels randomly disconnected for some reason. The animation for Volume 3 is probably my most preferred look so far. I believe the way that Volume 3 looked, they nailed it. There was always this incline in terms of animation. Things have always slowly but surely been getting better. However, I would have honestly preferred if they stayed in Poser. But that's not to say that Maya looks bad. As said, it looks absolutely amazing and beautiful. The way the expressions are able to be made blows away the first 3 volumes out of the water. But it's the fact that we've already gone 3 volumes with one style of animation. To go with a completely different one is just that. It's different. Not bad, not better, but just different. And speaking of one of the biggest changes for this volume, the fight scenes. They are different. They are 100% different. The fight scenes from the trailers up to Volume 2 had that hands-on Monty touch. With Monty's passing before Volume 3, there was an obvious change in their fight scenes. However, Shane was still there to keep up the style of choreography along with newcomer Dylan. But with Volume 4, both Shane, Dylan, and Monty's style are gone. There's an obvious change and there's no denying that. But that doesn't exactly mean that it's bad. Let's take, for example, martial arts. It's like comparing karate to taekwondo. Yes, the two are martial arts and they share many similarities. However, the two are different nonetheless. And to say one is better than the other is apples to oranges. It's not fair to say one is superior to this one. You may enjoy one better than the other, but you can't say that one is bad in comparison. If one of the two things is going to be bad, it better be because it is bad. Not just bad when compared. Yes, I myself did like the previous choreography of the past volumes, but I understand this is not bad, it's just different. There were even times when I was watching some of the fights hoping they would do similar shots that we've seen previously. A perfect example is when Ranger was fighting that Grim. When Nora free falls off that building and hits the horse over the head with the hammer, as it was happening I was hoping that they would do a similar camera shot as they did when Nora hit the Deathstalker. But during Volume 4, Nora just moved at the same pace the whole way through the attack, and it just kind of fell flat, not as impactful as a strike. Another thing about this volume, and presumably future volumes as well, is the physics. For the most part in previous volumes, things acted the way they should under normal gravity, but with Volume 4, things felt as though they floated a bit much as if they had low gravity. It's something I feel as though they're just gonna roll with, judging by how Nora's grenades are weaving back and forth and how everyone jumps. It seems to be the thing that they're just gonna stick with, and I personally am just gonna have to get used to it. But after all that, is Rwby Volume 4 good? Well, one of the only ways I feel as though I can describe Rwby Volume 4 is different. It's different from all the other volumes prior to it. The animation has changed, the fighting has changed, the way the stories are told have changed. It's all changed, it's all different. But that doesn't mean it's bad, and that doesn't particularly mean that it's better as well. It's just different. Except for the music. The music's still dope.